Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: Ethiopia-Eritrea tensions raise new conflict fears, arms makers post record sales as wars fuel demand, landmine casualties hit four-year high, drones to further revolutionize warfare, and skin's built-in cancer defense turned off by too much sunlight. Starting with politics, Tunisian opposition leaders receive 5 to 45 years in prison. 40 people were charged in the case of conspiracy to overthrow the president in one of the largest political prosecutions in Tunisia's recent history. 20 of those charged have fled abroad and were sentenced in absentia. Critics said the rulings were a sign of President Sayed's increasingly authoritarian rule. Point: Ukraine's top peace negotiator quits after raid by anti-graft police. President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, a close ally who has headed Ukraine's negotiation team at peace talks, resigned hours after anti-corruption agents searched his home following a major probe into high-level graft. Point: Peru sentences former President Vizcarra to 14 years for corruption. He was found guilty of taking bribes while serving as governor of a southern state. Vizcarra alleged his sentence was retribution for standing up to the right-wing political groups that control Congress. Why Senegal is resisting the IMF. The International Monetary Fund says conditions on its new bailout on a debt restructuring is needed to stabilize finances, but the Faye Sonko government views the proposal as politically and economically unacceptable. After an audit revealed nearly $7 billion in hidden liabilities, Senegal's debt soared to about 119% of GDP, prompting the IMF to suspend a $1.8 billion program. Point: Bangladesh's ex-leader, Hasina, and niece guilty of corruption. Hasina was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and her niece, British Labour Party lawmaker Tulip Siddiq, to 2 years for corruption involving a government land project. The court ruled Hasina misused her power as Prime Minister, while Siddiq was guilty of corruptly influencing her aunt in helping her mother and 2 siblings get a land plot in a government project. Moving to stories in conflict, Ethiopia-Eritrea tensions raise fears of fresh regional conflict. Ethiopia and Eritrea are trading increasingly hostile rhetoric as Addis Ababa demands Red Sea access, calling it an existential national priority. Abiy Ahmed has hinted at forcibly taking Assab, prompting Eritrea to accuse Ethiopia of provoking war. Soldiers seize power in Guinea-Bissau and detain the president. A group of military officers say they have seized control of Guinea-Bissau amid reports that President Embalo has been arrested. An emission from the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, has left Guinea-Bissau saying the president had threatened to expel it. The team was sent to the country last month to help it reach a political consensus on how to conduct elections this year. Peace eludes South Lebanon as Israeli strikes continue. A year after the ceasefire, Israeli strikes continue across southern Lebanon, undermining hopes for stability. Despite the truce requiring Hezbollah to withdraw south of the Litani and Israeli troops to pull back, Israel maintains positions in Lebanon and carries out near-daily attacks, citing Hezbollah's rebuilding efforts. More than 330 people have been killed and many villages remain destroyed and depopulated. Drones to further revolutionize warfare. Much like the Kalashnikov rifle in the previous century, mass adoption of drones became an asymmetric weapon of choice for forces facing long odds in global warfare, such as the Hamas militant group in Gaza, anti-junta rebels in Myanmar's civil war, and the militaries of poorer nations, including many in Africa. But the Goliaths have caught up, while drug cartels are improving and adapting drones to fight the narco wars of the future. Investigation reveals chlorine gas used as weapon in Sudan. Evidence suggests the Sudanese army used chlorine to recapture a strategic refinery from civil war opponents, the Rapid Support Forces militia. In September 2024, barrels containing chlorine gas were dropped from the air near a refinery north of the capital, Khartoum. After reviewing images of the attacks, 5 experts confirmed they were consistent with aerial drops of chlorine barrels. Here's the latest in economic trends. Africa nears record $1 trillion in state-owned assets under management. Assets managed by public pension funds, central banks and sovereign wealth funds have grown as the continent is increasingly turning inward for investment due to cuts in concessional finance and aid. The Libyan Investment Authority, with $68 billion in assets under management, is the largest among Africa's roughly 33 sovereign wealth funds, while funds in sub-Saharan Africa, however, manage just 1% of the total. Point. Swiss voters reject proposed tax on very wealthy. The proposed 50% tax on inherited fortunes of $62 million or more was seen as a litmus test of appetite for wealth redistribution in Switzerland, as other countries, such as Norway, who have increased their wealth tax or debated similar moves. However, 78% of Swiss voted against the plan. India posts fastest growth in 6 quarters, cushions against tariffs. The world's 5th largest economy grew at its fastest pace in 18 months in the July-September period, lifted by robust consumer spending and front-loading of production ahead of local festivals and US tariffs. Point. China Central Bank to crack down on virtual currency. The People's Bank of China warned of a resurgence in speculation and vowing to crack down on illegal activities involving stablecoins. It said that crypto speculation has recently increased due to various factors, presenting new challenges for risk control. Manufacturing weakens in Europe, Asia, on falling demand, tariff uncertainties. The US, Eurozone, China and Japan all saw manufacturing activity contract in November, although there were bright spots for Britain and economies in Southeast Asia, which saw growth. Now for news in development. World's arms makers post record $679 billion sales as wars fuel demand. Sales by the world's top 100 arms makers were up 5.9% last year, as wars in Ukraine and Gaza drove demand, as part of a 26% rise in arms revenues over the 2015 to 2024 period. A 10% revenue decline for China's arms makers bucked the trend as corruption purges slowed arms contracts and procurement. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute said arms revenues have climbed 26% over the 2015 to 2024 period. Ireland tightens immigration rules. The government said rapid population growth and rising numbers of asylum seekers are placing heavy pressure on housing and public services. Point. Peru's state of emergency amid migrants leaving Chile. Large numbers of mostly Venezuelan migrants have left Chile amid rising anti-immigrant sentiment. The shift follows ultra-conservative Chilean candidate Cast's threats of mass deportations during the presidential campaign, prompting many undocumented migrants to flee north. Peru has deployed armed forces as migrants become stranded between borders. Asahi says 1.5 million customers' data potentially leaked in cyber attack. A September ransomware attack crippled Asahi's Japanese operations and may have exposed customer data. The breach caused nationwide drink shortages and forced Asahi to delay financial results while restoring and securing its network. Landmine casualties hit 4-year high, driven by conflicts in Syria, Myanmar. More than 6,000 incidents were recorded in 2024, including 1,945 deaths and 4,325 injuries, the highest annual total since 2020. Nearly 90% of victims were civilians, with almost half women and children. The data comes as some European countries move to withdraw from a treaty banning landmine use, citing the threat of Russian aggression. Finally, our social news. Ethiopian volcano unexpectedly erupts after 12,000 years. The volcanic ash and dust from the eruption of the long inactive volcano in northern Ethiopia since spread across continents and disrupted flights in India and the United Arab Emirates. Point. Russia threatens full ban on WhatsApp. Russia is already limiting some calls on WhatsApp, owned by Meta Platforms, and on Telegram, accusing the foreign-owned platforms of refusing to share information with law enforcement in fraud and terrorism cases. Russia's communications watchdog threatened to block WhatsApp entirely if it fails to comply with its laws. Over 120,000 home cameras hacked for sexploitation. 4 people have been arrested in South Korea for allegedly hacking video cameras in homes and businesses and using the footage to make sexually exploitative materials for an overseas website. Police said the accused exploited the Internet Protocol, IP, cameras' vulnerabilities, such as simple passwords. Congolese authorities declare end of Ebola outbreak in Kasai. The Democratic Republic of Congo said no new cases were reported in the past 42 days. A total of 53 confirmed cases, 45 deaths, and 11 probable cases were recorded during the country's 16th Ebola outbreak, while more than 47,500 people were vaccinated. Point: skin's built-in cancer defense turned off by too much sunlight. Excess much sunlight can flip a hidden switch inside skin cells that makes inflammation spiral out of control and increases the risk of cancer. UV radiation breaks down a protective protein called YTHDF2, which normally prevents a small RNA signal from activating an immune sensor linked to dangerous inflammation. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.